The dangerous freedom of believing in nothing, nihilism. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that nothing matters. Not your job, not your relationships, not your dreams, not even your suffering. The world continues, indifferent to your existence. The sun doesn't rise for you. The stars don't recognize your name. The universe, a vast cold expanse, offers no answers, no comfort, no inherent meaning. At first, this realization feels terrifying, like standing at the edge of an abyss. But then something strange happens. You feel light, free, released from the crushing weight of expectations and illusions. If nothing matters, then you can do anything, right? But that's where the danger begins. That's where nihilism opens its jaws, not as a philosophy, but as a psychological cliff we're all standing on. And most of us don't even know we're close to the edge. We talk a lot about beliefs, religion, politics, identity, purpose. But we rarely ask a deeper question. What happens when belief itself collapses? When the scaffolding of meaning is stripped away and we're left staring into the void? That's what nihilism is. It's not just the absence of belief. It's the realization that all beliefs might be illusions. That morality, truth, value, even reality itself could all be constructs. And once you see that possibility, you can't unsee it. You start asking dangerous questions. What if good and evil are human inventions? What if love is just a biochemical trick? What if success is a game with arbitrary rules? What if everything we live for is a story we've told ourselves to avoid the terror of being alive in a meaningless cosmos?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And yet, here's the paradox. Nihilism doesn't feel like despair at first. It often feels like liberation. Like we've finally taken the red pill. Like we've broken free of the matrix. And that's why it seduces so many people. Because in a world dominated by fake smiles, curated social media lives, and shallow pleasures, nihilism feels real. It strips away the fluff. It exposes the lies. It says what few dare to say. Maybe none of this matters. And in a world full of noise, that silence feels profound. But here's the problem. If nothing matters, then anything becomes permissible. There are no rules, no limits. No reasons not to hurt, to destroy, to give up. And while that might sound extreme, you'd be surprised how many people are living this reality in subtle ways. They scroll endlessly, not because they're entertained, but because they've stopped caring. They sabotage relationships, not out of malice, but because they don't believe in love anymore. They drift through life, not because they're lazy, but because the idea of a meaningful goal feels like a joke. That's the shadow of nihilism. Not dramatic rebellion, but quiet decay. Let me ask you something that might hit too close to home. When was the last time you believed in something so deeply that you'd sacrifice for it? Not because you were told to or trained to, but because it felt true. If you can't remember, you're not alone. We're living in a cultural moment where belief is fragile, where irony replaces sincerity, where skepticism is cooler than conviction, where commitment is mocked and detachment is worshipped. We call it being chill, being above it, being unbothered. But sometimes that's just a mask for nihilism. Now, don't get me wrong. Questioning meaning isn't bad. In fact, it's essential. Blind belief is dangerous too. But here's what separates healthy doubt from nihilism: direction. Doubt asks, is this true? Nihilism says, nothing is true. Doubt wants to rebuild. Nihilism wants to burn it all down. And once you start burning, it's hard to stop. You become addicted to deconstruction. Every belief feels like a lie. Every emotion feels manufactured. Every purpose feels fake. And eventually, you don't just stop believing in the world, you stop believing in yourself. This is why Nietzsche called nihilism the most unsettling guest humanity would ever face. He saw it coming like a storm on the horizon. He predicted that as religion lost its grip, as science stripped the universe of mystery, as tradition eroded under modernity, we would be left naked. No gods, no higher purpose, just raw existence. And in that void, we would either collapse or evolve. So here's the real question. What do you do after the collapse? If nihilism is the death of belief, what comes next? Do we numb ourselves with pleasure? Do we distract ourselves with status? Or do we dare to create meaning in the absence of any guarantee that it's real? That's what we'll explore in the next part. Because nihilism isn't just a void, it's also a mirror, a test, a forge. It forces us to ask, if nothing is given, can we still choose to live as if something matters? The void and the mirror. What nihilism reveals about who you really are standing in the aftermath of meaning's collapse, when all the scaffolding of belief has crumbled around you, is like standing before a mirror that doesn't reflect your face but your soul. Nihilism isn't just the absence of belief, it's the moment where the universe no longer hands you a script and suddenly you're left improvising in a promised ending. That's terrifying. But it's also the most honest moment you will ever experience. Because in that silence, where no voice tells you what to do, who to be, or why it matters, you finally see what's left of you when everything else is stripped away. And that is where the real philosophical journey begins. You see, nihilism doesn't destroy meaning, it just removes borrowed meaning. The inherited values, the cultural myths, the second-hand beliefs we never questioned. It exposes the parts of us that were living someone else's purpose, chasing someone else's dream. When you believe in nothing, you're forced to confront everything. You realize how much of your life was built on assumptions, on convenience, on fear, and in that raw confrontation you meet yourself, not the persona, not the polished version, but the primal, uncertain self who is capable of both despair and creation. This is what makes nihilism a mirror. Because when the world no longer tells you what to value, you have to decide, and that decision is what makes you who you are. Not your upbringing, not your job, not your personality traits, but your choice in the face of nothingness. Do you retreat into numbness, or do you dare to create meaning in a world that offers none? That question, more than anything else, reveals your character. Let me ask you something you may have never allowed yourself to fully consider. If no one was watching you, if no reward waited for you, if the universe didn't care one way or the other, what kind of person would you choose to be anyway? Most of us never answer that question because we're too busy performing. For parents, for society, for algorithms. But nihilism removes the audience. It strips away the applause. And what's left is terrifyingly pure authenticity or emptiness. You either build yourself from the ground up or you collapse under the weight of your own irrelevance. But here's where it gets even more profound. When you create meaning in the face of meaninglessness, that meaning becomes realer than any inherited value could ever be, because it wasn't handed to you. It was forged, chosen, earned. That's what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the Übermensch, the one who creates values where there are none. Not a tyrant, not a god, but a human being who has looked into the abyss and decided not to fall but to build a ladder. That's the hidden purpose of nihilism. It's not a philosophy of despair. It's a crucible. It asks, can you still choose love, even when you know it might be an illusion? Can you still choose kindness, even when there's no cosmic scoreboard keeping track? Can you still build something beautiful, knowing that time will eventually erase it? If you can answer yes, even once, you've already transcended nihilism. You've turned the void into a canvas. And that's why nihilism is dangerous, but not in the way most people think. It's not dangerous because it leads to destruction. It's dangerous because it demands radical responsibility. No more blaming fate. No more pointing to tradition. No more waiting for signs. It's just you, your choices, and the world you're willing to create. That freedom is terrifying, but it's also sacred. And here's the twist. When you live this way, when you choose meaning without needing reassurance, you become incredibly powerful. Not because you have the right beliefs, but because you've stopped outsourcing your soul. You no longer need permission to matter. You decide that you do. And in doing so, you give others permission too. You become a mirror for them, reflecting back the possibility that we don't need certainty to live meaningful lives. We only need courage. In the next part, we'll take this even further. We'll look at how nihilism shows up in our everyday lives, in our culture, our relationships, our technology, and how to recognize when we've unknowingly started to live as if nothing matters. We'll explore the signs of unconscious nihilism and how to reverse it by reclaiming agency over your inner world. Unconscious nihilism. How modern life trains you to stop caring. We often imagine nihilism as some grand philosophical stance, a deliberate rejection of meaning, a cold intellectual rebellion against the universe. But in reality, the most dangerous form of nihilism isn't the loud, dramatic kind, it's the quiet, invisible one. The kind that creeps into our lives without our noticing. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear black or quote Nietzsche. It just slowly teaches us day by day to stop caring. to stop hoping, to stop believing that anything we do truly matters. And the most terrifying part? Most of us are already living in it. Modern life is a machine designed to divert us from ourselves. We're surrounded by endless stimulation, infinite content, constant notifications. There's always something new to watch, something new to buy, someone new to imitate. And underneath it all, a subtle message hums like background radiation: don't stop. Don't feel, don't think too deeply. Just keep scrolling. Every app, every feed, every algorithm is built to capture your attention, not to nourish it, but to consume it. And when your attention is consumed, your meaning is too. 1 minute at a time, one meaningless dopamine hit after another. But what does that have to do with nihilism? Everything. Because meaning isn't something that exists out there. It's not a product you can buy or a belief system you can download. Meaning is something you build with attention, with intention, with effort. And when your life is constantly distracted, constantly fragmented, constantly outsourced to screens and trends, you stop building it. You become passive, detached. You start saying things like, it's whatever. Who cares? Nothing really matters anyway. Not because you've thought deeply and concluded that life is meaningless, but because you've become numb. And numbness is the silent twin of nihilism. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you felt something so deeply it scared you? Not just surface emotion, but a real, soul-shaking intensity. Was it awe? Was it grief? Was it love? Or have you been living on emotional autopilot, smiling when expected, laughing on cue, but feeling hollow underneath? That's not living. That's surviving. And it's not your fault. We've built a culture that rewards detachment. We call it low maintenance, chill, unbothered. But what it really is disengaged. Because caring deeply is dangerous in a world that constantly changes. It makes you vulnerable. And so we protect ourselves not with armor, but with apathy. Even our language reveals the infection. We say cringe when someone expresses themselves too sincerely. We mock people for being too intense, too passionate, too much. But what are we really mocking? Vitality, aliveness, conviction. Modern culture trains us to flinch at sincerity and to glorify irony. And irony, when overused, becomes a shield against meaning. If you never take anything seriously, you never have to risk being wrong, being hurt, being exposed. But you also never get to be real. This is the essence of unconscious nihilism. Not that we believe life has no meaning, but that we live as if it doesn't. We go through the motions. We chase goals that don't fulfill us. We distract ourselves from the emptiness with entertainment, with status, with consumption. And deep down we know something is missing. But we're too tired, too overstimulated, or too afraid to ask what it is. So what's the way out? It starts with awakening. With noticing the moments where you've stopped caring, not because you've transcended desire, but because you've been disappointed too many times. It starts by realizing that apathy isn't peace. It's grief in disguise. A grief for the parts of you that used to believe, that used to hope. And from that awakening comes a choice. Do I continue numbing myself? Or do I begin the painful, beautiful process of re-engaging with life? Because yes, caring hurts. It exposes you. But it also connects you. It makes you human. And that's the great irony. The world that trains you to stop caring is starving for people who do. People who care deeply, who feel fully, who speak honestly, who live like what they do actually matters. Not because they have all the answers, but because they refuse to be spectators in their own lives. In the final part, we're going to explore exactly how to build meaning in a meaningless world. We'll look at how to live as if life matters even when you're not sure it does. We'll talk about responsibility, purpose, and the power of small, deliberate acts. Because nihilism may be the collapse, but what comes after is creation. Living like it matters. How to create meaning in a meaningless world. So we've stood in the void. We've stared into the mirror of nihilism. We've seen how modern life subtly trains us to stop caring, how we become detached, passive, and numb without even realizing it. But now comes the real question. What do we do about it? If the universe offers us no inherent meaning, if nothing is guaranteed to matter, can we still choose to live like it does? Can we build meaning, not from some divine blueprint, but from the raw material of our choices, our struggles, and our love? The answer is yes, but it's not easy. Because to live as if life matters is to swim upstream against the tide of cynicism, against the culture of apathy, against your own fear of being vulnerable again. It requires an act of rebellion, and not the kind that wears leather jackets or burns flags. The real rebellion is sincerity, conviction, presence. It's choosing to care in a world that constantly tells you not to. It's choosing to speak truthfully when lies are more profitable. It's choosing to show up fully in a life that will never guarantee you anything in return. Here's the secret no one tells you. Meaning isn't found, it's made. It's made in the way you treat people when no one's watching. It's made in the effort you put into something that may never be recognized. It's made in the promises you keep, the art you create, the pain you endure without becoming bitter. Meaning is not some grand revelation. It's a discipline, a practice, 1,000 small decisions to live with integrity, even when the world feels chaotic and indifferent. And the beauty of this is that you don't need to be certain. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to act as if it matters. Because the moment you begin to live that way intentionally, wholeheartedly, something shifts. You create a center of gravity within yourself. And that gravity begins to shape the world around you. You begin to attract other people who are also trying to live deeply, honestly, awake. And together, you start building something real. Let me ask you something radical. What would your life look like if you lived every day as if it mattered, even if you couldn't prove that it did? What if you treated your time like it was sacred? What if you showed up for your relationships like they were the most important thing in the universe? What if you created art or wrote stories or built communities not because they would last forever, but because they were worth doing now? This is how we overcome nihilism, not by proving that life has meaning, but by living in such a way that meaning becomes undeniable. Not to the universe, but to ourselves. We become the source. We become the meaning makers. Not gods, not prophets, just human beings who refuse to let the void have the last word. And yes, there will be days when the doubt creeps back in. When you wonder why you're trying so hard. When it feels like no one cares. When the world seems too broken. But remember this, meaning is not something you wait for, it's something you give. And in giving it, you create it. Every time you love without reason. Every time you forgive. Every time you choose to rise instead of retreat, you are shaping a life that defies the void. So here we are, at the end of the journey, back where we started. The dangerous freedom of believing in nothing has one final gift, the power to believe in anything. And when you wield that freedom with intention, with compassion, with courage, you don't just survive the void, you illuminate it. You become the light. Now go live like it matters. Because even if the universe is silent, you're not. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything.